So, finally, wrapping up the unit, we're going to finish up with the circular flow of economic activity. And before we do that, we need to go back and talk about this word that we've brought up a couple times, and that word is just the word market. And we've heard the word market plenty of times before. You might think about the stock market or the farmer's market or the supermarket, the grocery market. Well, what exactly does that mean? Well, a market, in its simplest terms, is just a place wherever buyers and sellers are interacting with one another. And, like we said, there's markets for everything, like the stock market where you buy and sell stocks, right? The farmer's market is where farmers come and sell their produce or whatever else it might be. We talk about other markets as well. Maybe you talk about the coffee market, the market for coffee, and that's where coffee is being bought and sold. But we're going to talk about two markets today that are kind of broad ones. And the first one we want to talk about is called the product market. And again, in economics, they name things very well. And so the product market is just a market wherever goods and services or products are being bought and sold. We also have the factor market, and the factor market is wherever we see the factors of production or those resources being bought and sold. And we want to see today how these two interact with one another and form this flow of economic activity within our system. But before we do that, last thing I want to talk about on this slide is the payments for the factors in the resource market. These are things that you're not going to need to know for your test, but these are words that I'm going to be throwing around every once in a while, and I want you to be familiar with them. And so what this means is when we talk about those resources, capital, entrepreneurship, land, and labor, what is the payment for those called? And I think we're familiar with maybe some of these, but not all of them. So the payment for capital is just interest. Entrepreneurship is profit. Land is rent. And maybe the one you're most familiar with is labor. We call it wages. And again, these are just terms that might pop up every once in a while, and I wanted you to see them and know them and just at least be somewhat familiar with them in case they do come up. But let's take a look at this circular flow. And again, when we name things, they make it really easy. We want to see how economic activity flows within our economy, and it's specifically going to be flowing in a circle. So there's two major players within an economy, and especially thinking in a free market economy like ours. There's firms and businesses, and there's also households and individuals. So firms and businesses would be like any store or any company or any business you might go to. Individuals and households are us, right? The people we typically think of as like the everyday people, the ones who go to the store and buy things, that kind of thing. And we're going to start off in the product market because this is the easiest one to understand. And all we want to see here is how do firms and businesses interact with one another when it comes to the buying and selling of goods and services or products. Well, again, I think you guys probably already know this, but we just haven't put an actual flow to it, and we're going to see that here. Obviously, we know that when it comes to goods and services, businesses are the ones who act as the sellers of goods and services, and individuals, us, we act as the buyers of them. And that's why we have that flow of goods and services going from the firms and businesses. And if you follow the arrows finish up at the individuals and households. So businesses provide goods and services to individuals and households. But do they give those for free? Do they provide them for free? No. The exchange going the other direction, right? The arrows flowing the other way is what do we give in exchange for those goods and services? Well, we give money, right? We view that money for us as consumer spending, but businesses view that as their income. So whenever you go to the store, maybe you go to Kroger and you buy something, you're receiving a good and service from that business, but you are giving them money. You are spending money as a consumer in exchange. And that money that the business received, they view that as their business income. The one that's a little tougher to understand is the factor or the resource market. But what we want to do here is understand who, out of the firms or the individuals, is acting as the buyer and the seller of resources. Now, we say in a free market economy, similar to that of what we see in the United States, that individuals and households are the ones that own the factors of production. Like, think about it this way. You own your labor. You, as an individual, you can provide labor and you get to choose what you do with that labor. So you as an individual can choose to sell your labor or that factor of production to a business or to some sort of firm. And you do this all the time. Like if you have a job, what you do is you go to your job and you say, hey, I would like to sell to you 1 hour of my labor at $10. And your boss might say, or your employer might say, okay, we will take 8 hours of your labor at $10 per hour, right? That's how it works. And it's weird for us to think of it that way, but that's really what's happening is you are selling your labor. Now, again, individuals provide all those factors of production to businesses, but do we do it for free? Like, are you going to go to work for free? No. And so there needs to be some sort of flow, and specifically the flow of money going from businesses to individuals in exchange for those resources. Now, businesses view that money that they spend on resources as their production costs. We view it as our income, right? When you go to work and you sell or provide your labor, you receive your income in exchange. Now let's take a look at how these all interact together. If you stack these two on top of each other, you notice that we do have this circular flow. And what we actually see is two circles flowing in opposite directions of one another. So let's talk about how these flows work. And we're going to start with the inner circle, the one that's flowing counterclockwise. And you might call this the flow of money. So let's start with individuals and households. We spend money, right? Consumer spending. We spend money on goods and services, and businesses receive that money as their business income. Then the businesses take that money and they use that money to buy more resources, and that purchasing of the resources is their production costs. And they then buy resources, but they buy them from the individuals who receive that money as personal income that they then use to spend. And the businesses receive that as their income, and then the businesses spend that on more resources. And you can see how that flow, that inner circle flow, works. But on the outside, we have a flow going in the opposite direction, going clockwise. And this you might say is like the flow of stuff. So let's start again with individuals and households. We sell those factors of production to businesses in the factor or the resource market. So businesses receive those factors of production, and what do businesses do with those resources? Well, they have the technology, they have the ability to turn those resources, those factors of production, into goods and services. So they then sell those goods and services in the product market to individuals like us, and we receive those goods and services so that we can go about and live our daily lives, so that we can continue to provide the factors of production to businesses, and the flow continues. Now, you will never see this probably show up again in the same way that I've shown you in this video, because I want you to understand what the flows are. And really what I'm saying is I want you to understand what each person or each player's role is within each market, right? When it comes to the product market, who does what and which way is what flowing, right? Now, a better way of looking at this, I like to kind of look at it almost like a Punnett square, like you see maybe back in freshman year biology, is what is the role of each player in each market? So here's what we mean by that. When it comes to the product market, what do individuals do? Well, we as individuals, we buy goods and services, right? In the product market, we don't act as the sellers of those products. We act as the buyers of them. Like you go to the store to buy stuff. Now, like we just mentioned, businesses, firms, those stores, they act as the sellers of those goods and services. So we buy goods and services, and as individuals, the businesses sell the goods and services. And remember, there's that exchange of money and the exchange of goods and services. The goods and services flow from the businesses to the individuals, and the individuals they send money to businesses in exchange for those goods and services. In the factor market, we notice that individuals sell those factors of production, right? Like the easiest one to understand is our labor. We sell our labor or those factors of production to businesses, and businesses buy the factors of production to take those factors of production and turn them into more goods and services. And so we can kind of see the flow at work here, just even in this little Punnett square. You can see how we have the selling of the factors of production. Businesses buy the factors of production so they can create goods and services and sell those goods and services, so that individuals can buy the goods and services so that they may further live their lives to sell the factors of production. And it just kind of flows in that circle. But what I want you to be able to do is understand what the role of each of these players is in each market, so that you could be given a blank circular flow model, or maybe it's set up in a different way, and you would still know who is flowing or who is where and what is flowing where the whole entire way around.